Good afternoon. Welcome to Updating Your Student Data in Performance Plus. This is Ann Mordecai. I'm here with Mike Schwartz.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
We are going to be talking about how you can update student data in Performance Plus, all different kinds of student data, demographic data, assessment data. What else? I can't even think of anything else. I'm stuck on that.
Demographic data, assessment data, and
intervention
data.
Yeah.
In particular, I guess there are kind of three main goals. Right, Ann?
Right. You want to go right to that, and then let me just do a little housekeeping. On your control panel, there's a space where you can enter questions. So please, if you have questions, just type them in, and whoever isn't talking will be monitoring that, and we will answer your questions. You can also raise your hand somehow, but we don't notice that as quickly. So if you just type in the question, that's great. One thing that would be nice to know is, can you hear me? So if you can hear me, could you just send something in the little question spot and say yes? And if yep, okay, I'm getting some yeses, so that's good. Great, thank you very much. Hi. So I will continue on. There's also a place on that same panel where you can get some handouts. We put two handouts out there. One of them is the PowerPoint, and one of them is something that we'll be showing you parts of in a little while. So you'll want those two handouts. And is that about it for housekeeping? Think of anything else?
No, I think so. So we definitely encourage questions. We're going to go through a presentation, but by all means, please ask us questions that you might have. And then again, those handouts, as Ann mentioned, those are for you to use back in your school. So, a lot of the stuff, we know we're going through this fairly quickly. You can definitely, take the PowerPoints and share it with other folks within your school districts as well.
Okay, thanks. So today's goals, there are three main goals. We want to help you understand the flow of student data into Performance Plus and all the timelines that go along with that. So that's the demographic data that gets updated every year, and the beginning of the year upload, and there's an end of the year one, right? Mm-hmm. This is Mike's stuff. Yep. And we want to explain, a lot of people are looking for their STAR data. They think it's going to show up automatically. There are a few steps you have to take to get STAR, NEWA, and different other national test data out there. And then we will talk about putting out local data. So assessments either you have written locally, or Fontes and Pinnell that you're scoring locally, DRA that you're scoring locally, you can put that data out there. So we're going to show you some different ways to do that.
And also, just to kind of set expectations as well, we only have an hour, so the purpose of this today is really trying to give you an idea of how the data is loaded, give you an idea of where you can change some of the data yourself, for instance, loading your local Fontes and Pinnell results. But it's not going to be a detailed step-by-step of how you do each one of these things. So by all means, as you've got questions and you want to do certain things going down the road, just send us an email and we'll be happy to help you if you need additional assistance. But hopefully this will at least give you a good understanding of what's possible.
Okay, so one of the first things we'd like to do is have you fill out a poll. I guess actually I have to start it. So there's a poll, and I think it'll show up in a second. I hope it'll show up in a second. Actually, maybe
I'll do it over here.
Yeah.
Oh, you did it.
There we go. So if you could just quickly answer this poll, that'd be great. Oh, poll in, okay.
So you should see a poll pop up, and we just want to get an idea of what your focus areas that you want us to talk about. What's most important to you.
And you can see that people are filling them out. There's some student demographic data is one thing you want to know about. National assessment data, it's all pretty even, really. Student demographic data is winning the poll here. Something else, a couple people have entered in that they want to learn something else. If you could type in the question area what those something else's are, that would be great.
In the chat or question area on the webinar.
Okay. It looks pretty even, except for the student demographic data is winning. This is a big contest here. Okay.
Great. So
thank you.
So we'll definitely be focusing on student demographics, which was seems like most interesting to folks. Just so you all know, national, I'm not sure if everyone sees the results. I don't think you do. So national assessments, like NWA, that was second, and then local assessments and are third, and data as well as data locally created. Okay, so let me get back to the presentation.
We have the agenda next. Yep. This is our agenda. We did introductions, and we want to talk about loading and looking at individual student information, then upgrading the demographics, creating groups, which is part of when you're looking at student data. You can have a special group of your own. Some groups are automatically made. Looking at state assessment data, how that gets in, national assessment data, local assessment data, and then wrap up. And any questions in between.
Great. So I'm going to start off with talking a little bit about the student data and the student demographic data. So hopefully this image looks familiar to all of you. This is, the kind of home toolbar for Performance Plus. And when you first come into Performance Plus, if you click on students, all of you, I'm sure at some point, or most of you, I would imagine at some point, have been to the student detail page. And so on the student detail page, there's a whole lot of information about the students. So this is what we refer to as the student demographic information and the student detail information. And so that's what we want to spend the first part of this presentation talking about. Where does this data get populated, or how does this data get populated? So as you'll see throughout this presentation, most of the student demographic data is going to come through the Department of Education from their I4C system. And so in this example, just the information that appears right at the top, the name of the student, John Smith, the student code, what school district and school, and what grade the student is in, their gender, all of that comes from I4C. The name, the gender, the date of birth has to be updated by the DOE I4C team. So if you ever need a change in name, gender, or date of birth for a student, you send an email to the I4C help desk, and they will update that for you. So any of this information in Performance Plus is updated on a nightly basis, any of this student demographic information. So if you make the change with the I4C help desk, today, then tomorrow that change of name should populate into Performance Plus. The grade, the school, and the district, that's part of the profile, that comes from I4C submissions. So you've got control over those changes directly through your I4C submissions. And I'll talk in another screen or two specifically about what submissions are used to determine the grade, the school, and the district that a student is in. But again, when you go to the student detail page, this information is coming through the department, through I4C, one way or the other. The next part of the student detail page is the list of assessments. So the assessments that come into the system come in through a variety of means, and we're going to talk about that at a later part of the agenda. And there's, again, a couple of different ways that this data gets in, and we'll detail that out. The next session is just of the student detail page. There's a list of reports, and so those reports are kind of static reports that are in Performance Plus, and they don't change. They're automatically created from year to year. So really, there's no information here that's uploaded. It's just an area for reports. And just to put this in context, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, I'm actually going to jump over real quick to Performance Plus. And so I'm logged into a training site right now, so this is not real data, so I won't be violating any FERPA laws. But I'm just going to go ahead and choose a building and choose a grade just to, actually, I think that might be an elementary school, so let me choose a younger grade. Nope, it probably wasn't an elementary school. I'll choose all grades. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, I want to pull up a student and show you the student detail page. So let's just give it a second. Okay, so I'm going to pull up this one student. And this is the page I'm talking about. So on the student detail page, this is all the information about, that the system has about the students. And again, we're just going through one section at a time. So this is what I was talking about at the beginning. And then we talked about assessments, reports, and now we'll go down to classes. Let me switch back over to the presentation. So the next section on that student detail page is the classes. And so here, you'll see a list of all the classes for the student from, the first date that data was uploaded for that student. The class submissions come really from the educator information system, which is the teacher credentialing system. But to get it into EIS, typically schools submit data through I4C. So your I4C has two submissions, the submission course and the student class submission. These two submissions populate I4C, and then the data from I4C is moved over to automatically by the Department of Education to the Educator Information System. So, and then the data from Educator Information System is what actually populates Performance Plus. And so what that means is you can upload a course submission or class submission in I4C that automatically gets loaded in the Educator Information System. And you then can make changes directly in the Educator Information System. So some small schools, there's two ways you can kind of keep your class submissions updated, your student class information, your class rosters updated. One option is that you upload I4C submissions on a regular basis. So the student class submission, you could upload that, weekly, monthly, daily, however frequently you want to track any changes in your students who are in your courses. The other option is that you can make the change directly in EIS. So you may want to upload your courses at the beginning of the year. And then if you're a small school, it might be easier just to go directly in EIS and add a student there. Either way, the student classes are updated in EIS and they get loaded into Performance Plus each night. So each night, whatever's in EIS is sent over to Performance Plus and updated. So if you ever, are wondering why isn't a student there or why isn't a class there, if you look in EIS, you'll likely find that it wasn't put in EIS yet, through I4C. So that's kind of the first place to check if you're not seeing the students.
So one of the questions, we've got a couple of this. So one of the people who wrote, they were interested in something else. They wanted to know about getting their rosters up for each school year, which is really what you just explained. And I just want to make sure that covered it for the people who asked.
So the best way to get your data in at the beginning of the year is to upload your submission course and your submission student class submission. And as a matter of fact, you can do that. Some schools even do that at the end of a year for the following year. So in June, for instance, if you already know your students coming in, especially on elementary school level or middle school level, you might already have all your students, scheduled. You can upload that submission at the end of the year, and it actually gets loaded still under, if we were doing it, say, at the end of last 16-17, it would still get uploaded in the 16-17 school year as a class, but the class name would say 17-18 on it. So you could start, and the advantage of doing that is it lets you load courses in June for the following year, so teachers can start looking at the students who are going to be in their class that next year. So certainly something that you can be doing. Again, as with all this stuff, if you're got a question about it, doesn't seem to be working, or you've forgotten something, definitely, send us an email and we'll help you.
Is there a manual or document that outlines how to upload that through EIS?
So if I go to the I4C workbench, so let me just go to the Department of Ed site. So I'm just going to type in I4C of the Department of Ed. The I4C homepage has a lot of information. So there's like a data dictionary that tells you about those different submissions. So the data dictionary, for instance, has this student class and the submission course. Those are the two submissions. And I think if you even click on one, there may be a sample submission out here. Yeah, so there's a sample submission. Although looks like it's saying the wrong name, but hopefully it's the right one. And then there are also, on that same homepage, there are some other support documents. So if you go down here, there's some support guides that give you examples of the different submissions. So let's see if there's one class submission. So this is summary steps. So this gives you the steps of how to submit it. So I encourage you to just type in I4C in your browser. It'll bring you right to the I4C main homepage. And if you go under the user support guides, you'll see a variety of different help documents.
We have another question.
Yeah.
You said we could add students to a class through EIS. Is that the case? You can add a course through EIS, which is also mentioned, but I don't believe there's an option to add a student. Is there? Is there? Question mark.
Yeah, there is the ability. Trying to see how I can do this without violating FERPA, because I don't have a test. I will try when Anne's presenting later to see if I can come up with a way to show you. But you can, when you log into EIS and you go under assignments and you find a given teacher and find a given course, it'll then give you a list of students, and there should be a spot there to add students as well. So I'll see if I can't show you that later. If not, definitely send me an email after and I can give you a one-on-one review of that. The other thing actually I'll do is I'll put a help document on our website as well for that. I'm also actually going to show you in a little while how we're opening up a new feature this year that lets you actually add students directly in Performance Plus. So we'll talk about that in a while as well, and that might be even a better way that you might decide you want to do it if you're in a small school district. Okay, so the next thing is student groups. So again, thinking about the student profile page, if I go back here, these are the information on the profile page. One is a list of student group information. Oops, sorry about that. So this student group information, I want to talk about how those groups are updated. But the other thing that dawns on me is that I should review is the fact that these student groups are the groups that are used when you do your searches. So like if I go under students and I want to search for all the students who are in a certain student group, that's the connection there. So if the student isn't part of that group, then when you search for students under, Career and Tech Ed program, for instance, they won't show up here. Or under 21st Century After School program. So looking at the profile, any of those groups are the kind of drive who's going to show up when you do a search. And the same thing is true for reports. When you're on a report and you run any report, those reports you can do filters, and one of the filters is student groups. So you might have a report that you've run before. Maybe it's one of the ones that was pushed out to you about the NECAP assessments or the Smart Balance assessments, excuse me. You can then filter and only look at certain students. Again, filtering for students in 21st century are going to show you all the students who are in that group. So let me go back to this part of the profile. So in terms of how these groups are loaded, most of the groups, again, come from the Department of Ed through the I4C system or other systems that you really provide the data to the department through these other source systems. And so as an example, what's that?
There's one I created.
There's one that Ann created here in our test data. This is test data. The number of schools attended, that comes from the end of year data that's submitted to the department. And I'll show you a detail. Actually, I should show you now this handout that details that. Let me see if it actually comes on the next slide.
Which is it?
Oh, I think what are you
looking for?
The handout?
Oh.
No, so in the next part of the presentation, next agenda item, I'm going to go into more detail about how each one of these student groups gets uploaded and when. The next part of the profile is the intervention area. And so student intervention data is also stored in Performance Plus. The intervention data comes from 2 or 3 main avenues. One is through AIMSweb, and the second is DIBBLES. So the department automatically gets data from AIMSweb and DIBBLES. So if you're an AIMSweb progress monitoring district or a DIBBLES progress monitoring district, that data is sent to the Department of Education on a weekly basis, and it's loaded directly into the intervention section of the students on a weekly basis. You also can enter interventions directly online, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later, because really interventions are kind of a type of assessment. So Ann's going to talk about that a little later.
Somebody's asking about, you said you'd create this document and wanted to know where they could find it. So we'll load it up onto the Demonstrated Success website. We can send an email out on how to get there, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. The final section, I think, on the profile page is the list of schools and districts. And so the list of schools and districts also comes from the Department of Education website. And it comes primarily through the I4C workbench. And it's updated through a variety of different submissions. So basically, and this is where I want to talk more about how you get students into your schools or your classes. Basically, there's an interface with the Department of Ed that's done on a nightly basis, and it'll look in multiple submissions for any student that might be part of your school. The first place it's going to look is in the incoming student roster. So let me just point to this. See my pointer?
I can do again. Yes. Well, did you just? Yeah, I can see it.
Oh, great. So the first place we're going to look is an incoming student roster. So the incoming student roster is an I4C submission. Typically, those submissions are required in early August. They're used for Performance Plus. They're also used for the assessment, getting ready for the state assessment tests. So incoming student rosters tell us what schools students are in, and that information is uploaded, used again on a nightly basis. Secondly, and you can upload incoming student rosters anytime. I mean, people are uploading those, anytime throughout the year, all the way through the Smarter Balance testing or the new New Hampshire SAS testing, the new state testing. And so whenever you upload those, any new students are pulled and added to your school. Second place that the nightly routine looks is submission BOI. So any students that you've entered in the beginning of year submission, which is due just about now, all those students associated with your schools are loaded, as well as your grades, because you enter what grade the student's in. That's loaded into Performance Plus from the BOI. Additionally, the class submission is reviewed. So any student in a student class submission is included and added in Performance Plus. So as an example, if you added a student today in Edgewood Elementary School in 4th grade, then that student would get a new record here in their student history for Edgewood Elementary School starting today, or starting. It would be added tomorrow. It's one day later. And then finally, we use the submission EOI at the end of the year for any student, and that's that updates any of the school history that might not have been put in there throughout the year,
including group. And one of the groups is the number of absences, right? Is that a group?
Yeah, so I'm going to get to that in a minute.
All right.
So,
sorry.
Yep. Nope. So are any questions right now?
Well, we do have questions about reports, so I was going to hold that off for just a minute.
Okay. So hopefully that gives you a kind of a base idea of where the data comes from for the student demographics, whether it's the student groups or the classes, the schools. Well, the next thing I want to talk a little bit more about is the more detail about the specific group data as well as the assessment data and when that data is loaded into Performance Plus in a little bit more detail. So one of the handouts that's attached to the GoToWebinar that you should see there, and you can download, is this document that's called the Upload Frequency for Assessment Demographics and Demographic Data Performance Tracker. So this is a 2 or 3 page document that just talks through when the data is loaded into Performance Plus. And so I want to talk briefly about that. So focusing on the student demographic data, again, as I mentioned before, we use the incoming student roster data, and so that usually starts in mid-August. Beginning in October, we'll start pulling from the beginning of year submissions. And we'll always be pulling from the classes and the courses to load the Performance Plus. The course and class uploads are done on a nightly basis, as I mentioned earlier, and that'll update Performance Plus the following day. There are a whole bunch of other groups that are in Performance Plus, as you're probably aware, and as Anne alluded to earlier. So the student groups including attendance and discipline, like the number of days suspended, the town responsible, the promotion indicator, was a student promoted or retained, or were they expelled, the number of schools the student attended. All of that information comes from the end of year data. So the department doesn't know whether a student, how many days absent a student was in the middle of the year. The department only knows that at the end of the year through the end of year submission. So those groups won't be updated until the very end of the year. So really, if you want to look at, how does attendance or absences impact student results on assessment, you have to wait until the end of the year and look back for that prior year. So right now, for instance, you could run a report and say, let me plot on a graph, scatter plot graph, the number of days absent compared to the assessment results for students, and see if there's a correlation. All that information, again, comes from the end of year. The town responsible, so as you may be aware, one of the groups is what town is responsible for that student. So example, right now I'm sitting in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and so Portsmouth High School has students that come from Portsmouth, that come from Greenland, from Newington, from Rye, from Newcastle. So the information about what town the students are from, that comes out of the beginning of year submission, because you submit that in the beginning of the year. I apologize for the spelling mistake there. And also the end of year submission, it gets updated. So once the beginning of year submission is processed, so again, later in October, you can start running reports based on town responsible. So, you may want to see, how are my students doing based on what town they're in, or other reports, just to identify, how students are doing, whether they're, maybe how if you want to look at your homeless students, how the homeless student population is doing. Title I, so Title I math and reading are also items that are student groups that are automatically uploaded from the department, and those come from the end of year academic submission. So again, you don't have those until the end of the year, so you can start looking at last year's results for that. The IEP indicator, so whether students on an IEP or not, that's loaded on a nightly basis from the SPED public submission. I'm sorry, from Nessus download. So you should, if you haven't seen that yet, you should see that at least by the end of this coming week, or next week, excuse me, and that is uploaded on a nightly basis. It's then synced at the end of the year with the submission SPED public that schools submit. Free and reduced lunch, so there's a filter for free and reduced lunch, and that's updated when you submit your I4C free and reduced submission. So usually those, I think, are due November 15th. 21st century community, so for those who have 21st century schools, that data is uploaded, I think, in January. It's voluntary. You don't have to do it in January, but those who do, we pull it from January, and then at the end of the school year, everyone has to do it. So it's pulled at the end of the year as well. And I should also point out, for that submission, it's pulled on a nightly basis. So anytime it's put in there, it'll be pulled, but typically there's no data in there until January for 21st century, and then again at the end of the year. Limited English proficient, that data comes from the ESOL system. So the data that's uploaded in ESOL, again, sometime by early November, that's done. We pull that, and again, if you modify something in ESOL later in December, we'll continue to pull it each night and get the latest data. Career and Tech Ed data, so is a student in a Career and Tech Ed program, that comes from the Career and Tech Ed I4C submission that schools submit. So again, that's pulled on a daily basis as you update the Career and Tech Ed system. And then finally, interventions, those come, again, as I mentioned earlier, from Dibbles or from Ames Web, as well as ones that you put in directly yourself.
Can you go back a page?
Okay.
To where it said about October 22nd. Beginning October 22nd, school rosters are uploaded, not before that?
So what that's talking about is specifically from the beginning of year submission. So most schools can't submit their beginning of year until after October 1st. And we typically don't have them certified until October 15th. And so that was just giving a little bit of a buffer. Having said that, I am 99% sure that the system is pulling from the beginning of the year on a daily basis. So I can follow up. I'll follow up with the IT department at the Department of Ed just to make sure they are taking the beginning of year data and putting it in a spot that's needed for Performance Plus as of now. But again, the course and class submission is the best way to get your data in. So I want to talk about a new way you can also edit your data, and that's directly in Performance Plus. So Performance Plus has a feature now that allows us, that we're able to turn on for school districts, that allows you to add students directly to classes in Performance Plus. We are going to try this out, and we're definitely looking for your feedback. So let us know if you think this is helpful or problematic, not necessarily right now, but just kind of going forward. However, any user now that is at a district level user, a district or school level user, who has rights to the full system, including the assessments, those users should now have a feature, or should now see an option of being able to add and remove students from classes. So for any of those users, if they click either on the class icon, which is this little desk icon, or if they click on the teacher icon and drill down to a class, any which way you get in Performance Plus to a class and list a list of students, you'll have two functions in there. One is you should be able to see a drop down where it says add students to class. And if you select that drop down and click go, it'll then bring you to the screen where you can search for students and add them. The other thing you should see is you should be able to check off students and click remove check students from class, and that'll remove students.
I have a question about that. So if I went in and updated a student with that nightly submission, yes. Okay, yeah. Sorry,
no,
that's question. Where you're going. Okay.
I was about to say, Ann, you beat me to it. Realize that there's still the possibility that you upload students directly from I4C or EIS, and they're going to affect this as well. And the way the Performance Plus handles it is students that you add manually. So if you add students manually, they will stay here regardless of what gets submitted through I4C or EIS. So each night, even though we take the data, even if you've added students, those students will stay. However, if you remove students from your class, but you have uploaded them in I4C, they will continue to get added back each day because Performance Plus doesn't know you're truly trying to remove it. So really the best way to remove students is just to make sure they're removed either in EIS or through I4C. But certainly adding students you can do easily through the system. The other thing that you'll now be able to do is edit student groups. And so again, just like you can add students to a class, you can add and take students away from groups. Same concept. If you add a student, for instance, to your IEP group, that's fine. That student will stay in that IEP group forever until you manually remove him or her. However, if you remove someone from the IEP group, but that student is marked in Nessus as IEP, they're going to come through the next day and get re-uploaded as IEP. So again, a really good way to add students that might be missing. It's a little bit more problematic to remove students if they truly are in the source system, but they shouldn't be in the source system if they're not supposed to be in that group any longer. So hopefully these features, especially I think adding students to a course would be very helpful. So if if you do your uploads just once or twice a year for the courses, you do it maybe each semester through I4C, and you want your teachers to you've got teachers that say my student isn't getting out of Performance Plus, you can easily through this prior screen go into the class and click add students to the class. The same thing goes with student groups, especially like Title I would be another good example because we don't update reading and math title information until the end of the year. So that's a place where if you want to start updating it from the beginning of the year, you could go right in here and edit the student group and add students through that process to your title group.
We have a question about adding students. So will this hurt the class course data via EIS? What if there are errors? If students are added in error, when and how does that get cleaned up?
So, it'll be up to you in Performance Plus. So this is not, thanks for the question, it's definitely good that I clarify. Any change you make in Performance Plus is not changing what's in the department's site. So if you add a student here, it's not going to add it to EIS or to I4C. So really, Performance Plus is there as a tool for your districts to use. It's nothing that the state's using to do any kind of monitoring. So Performance Plus is really your data to manage as you want this way. So if you add the wrong student in Performance Plus, it's not going to impact anything the department looks at. It really just will impact your own view within Performance Plus. So obviously you don't want to add the wrong students, and you would just go back into Performance Plus and remove the student, but it's not modifying the department's information. Hopefully that answers the question.
Is there a way to lock that option?
So the question is, there's a way to lock that option. So the only folks who should have that option are people who have the ability to manage your entire district or school and to add assessment frameworks. So if you've got people who you want them to be able to add frameworks but not modify the student records, then talk to me and we'll have to figure it out. But if you don't give people the role of modifying assessments, then you won't have, then they won't be able to modify those classes. And just to help make sure you understand what I'm saying as I talk through all this, let me just show you real quick. I think the best way to do this, if I go to the single sign-on system, let me just make sure you all are aware of. Let me just make sure you're aware of the different types of roles. So I'm going to look at it this way, it's the easiest way for me to show you the different types of roles. So this is just a feature within Performance. Many of the I4C admins have access to searching for users, etc. But the reason I'm doing this is because it shows you the different types of roles. So these are the different roles in Performance Plus. DOE roles, obviously, you don't have access to. But P plus class, so these are people who just can view their own class and the students within their own class. But they can also edit frameworks that Anne's going to show you in a little bit about, creating your own framework for loading data. But these first two are just class level users, so they can only see their own class and their own students. They cannot modify students or add students. The same is true with this next one for a school level user who does not have the ability to modify assessments. So none of these groups can add students to their groups or classes. Only this type of user can. That's the way we've got it set up right now. So again, we're trying this out this year. Give us your feedback if we need to modify this in some way, and give you different types of users. Maybe we have a class level user who can add groups and one that can't. We can do that type of thing. But I think we're going to see how it goes for the next month or two first. Okay, I'm sensitive of time as well, so I think we should keep going here, and I'm going to pass it on to Anne.
Okay, we're actually switching seats here. So I'm just going to quickly go over creating groups. So a lot of the groups, as Mike said, are created for you from the state, IEPs, groups, and career and tech ed groups. And you can also create your own groups. If you have a group of students that is an intervention group or a group of students that you're working with specifically, you can create your own group. And the way you would do that is go to the student search, the student icon, which is the three little kids at the top on the icon, and that would bring you to this page where you would choose the grade. Let's say you're working with a bunch of fourth grade students at Deacon Elementary. So you choose fourth grade student, Deacon Elementary, and the year would be whatever the year is, but it could be current year. And then you'd show all the students. So what happens is you get this huge list of students and however many there are in your fourth grade, and you just check. You go along and check the students that you want in this group, and check, 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 check. And then at the very bottom of the page, you would, under here, you're going to choose create a new focus group. When you create the new focus group, you then put in a name for that group, and you can create it as private or public. And I'm going to ask Mike this. If you create it as private, are you the only one who can see it, or are there people who are above you, they have higher access, can they see it?
I believe it's just you.
It's just, okay. So I usually create them as public because I want to share them, but sometimes there are reasons that you would want to keep them private. And once you do that, you create the group and add the selected students. So I'm going to create this group and add those selected students. Then I can actually use that group. And Mike talked about that a little bit, that you might want to use it when you're looking for students, or which would be this case, I want to look for students, or I want to, in the report, actually this would be the student search. So I want to look for that group I just created grade 3 win block. So I want to find any student that is in that group. I just show students, and all those students that I had checked would show up. That's about it for groups. It's fairly easy to do that, and you can call with questions if you have more questions. Somebody had a reporting question, and we're not going to really go into reports very much. And the question was about, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, is P Plus going to be easier? The reporting, is it going to be easier to use? And the reports that are sent to you like, which is nice. The reporting section is sometimes a little overwhelming, but there's so much that it can do that all those options are necessary. So is there anything else you want to add to that? I mean, once you use it, it gets pretty easy. And if one person creates a report, it can be saved and everyone else can see it, which is also useful.
Well, the only thing I'll say is that, and I think, did we create a little video on creating one single report?
I'm sure we have some, yeah.
Yeah, so we should look. So I know Ann and I have created some videos before in terms of just trying to walk you through some simple pieces of Performance Plus, or, just making it more simple, not a simple piece. So we'll look for that. And again, at the end of before the end of the webcast here, we'll just show you where you can find these types of resources, but we'll put that resource out there. And again, we'll probably send an email. We can definitely send an email out to everybody who attended this webinar today, reminding about where these things are and letting you know when we put them out there. So one of those videos we can definitely do is kind of the 1, 2, 3. Here's the basic steps to create a report. Because again, as Ann mentioned, once you've done it a few times, it's fairly straightforward, but it's definitely a bit overwhelming because of all the different options.
And if you have something specific that you're looking for, if you just either send that in questions or send us an email, we can create a quick video that's specific to what you're looking for, or just talk to you on the phone about it. Either one. Now I'm going to talk about getting data into P+, and this is where we're talking about assessment data. And there are 3 main types of assessment data. There's the state assessment data, which is the SBAC, used to be the SBAC, used to be a NECAP, the SAT data, and now the state assessment system. Is that what SAS stands for? The new system? Yeah. Then we have the national assessments, NEWA, STAR, just any test that's nationally normed that you take the test and somebody else is scoring it. That would be a national test. Local assessments would be anything that you create yourself and want to put out to P+, or something like F&P that you buy. So it's not really a local assessment. So you buy an F&P assessment or DRA assessment, but you score it yourself and you collect the data yourself. And then that needs to be updated by you. So I'll show you how to do that. You want to talk about the state assessments?
Sure, my turn.
Yeah.
So in terms of the timing for the state assessments, just so you understand, so especially because there's somewhat of a change this coming year, really there's going to be 3 primary vendors now because Measured Progress is no longer going to be providing the NECAP science in the future. It's all going to be done through the vendor AIR, and that's the same vendor that did Smarter Balance this past year. So the assessment scores for AIR, the window I think this coming year is March. It's March 18th or 12th, okay. Something like that, March through June. AIR provides that data back to the Department of Education on a daily or weekly basis, typically. And it takes them, they said this, I believe it's going to take them about 2 weeks, 10 days or so to get to score a student. And so you figure probably a 2-week delay after the student takes the test before the department gets it, and then probably another week before it gets handed off to Performance Plus, because Performance Plus will get it on a weekly basis. So there'll probably be about a 3-week delay from when a student takes the test until that data gets loaded in Performance Plus, which is, pretty good, I think, and especially compared to prior years. So hopefully you'll have that data in Performance Plus within about 3 weeks after the student completes the results. And that'll go on a weekly basis until all the data is loaded. And usually all the data is loaded by this year, I think it was by mid-July. DLM scores are usually put into Performance Plus early September. Although I know that we haven't received them yet from the department, so I don't think they're in there yet for this year. But it's sometime in September typically. And then the SAT results come in mid-June, and those are already in Performance Plus. So those are the state assessments and when the data gets loaded.
Any questions on that?
No. Nope.
Okay, national assessments, and these, I think we have some spelling mistakes on it, but that's also on that document, the same document that's part of the handout. And we're looking at NEWA, DIBELS, AIMSweb, STAR, and iReady is being developed. So some of you who are using iReady, that data can be loaded into P+. The way you do this is you have to fill out, for most of these, you fill out a form and send it to the DOE. For STAR data, you do that online on their system. You just go on and say, yes, I will allow my data to be sent to Performance Plus, which is what the forms are. And actually, we should have put those in handouts, but we'll send that in the email of how you can find those forms, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'll write that down. And those are loaded. I think they're loaded regularly, like weekly once the tests are done.
Yep, once a week.
Okay. And College Board is the SAT, so that's one of the state tests.
Well, just to clarify, right?
Oh, yep.
So, the state-administered SAT, which happens in March,
I think.
That's the one I talked about earlier that is loaded in June. But in addition to that, the College Board does provide the data for for students who take the SAT as well as the other tests outside of any state assessment. So any student who takes the SAT, that data does get flow into Performance Plus, and it's done throughout the year. So you've got the dates here, but January we get a file that has the fall SAT administration as well as the PSAT. And then in mid-July, there's an AP file that comes. So all this data also gets put into Performance Plus. So this is really some of the, obviously some of the best data for high schools, because there's a lot less assessing done at high school, outside, from a state perspective or from a national perspective. And then the access for ELL, so students who are English language learners, that data as well gets uploaded typically in May. I know that this year, again, there was a delay for that because the format changed, but that data is in there now.
Okay, thank you. And now to local assessments. So as I said before, local assessments can either be an assessment that you have made at your site or an assessment that you've purchased, but you're scoring it at your site. And we call all of that local assessment. And then intervention data. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. So Fontes and Pinnell and the DRA data, what happens is somebody for DRA, Fontes and Pinnell, and I think those are the only two we currently have those for. There's a framework that is set up. We set that up, and you then load your data into it. And I'll show you that in a minute. So if you have Fontes and Pinnell or DRA data and you don't have a place to put that in Performance Plus, let us know, and we will move the framework to your site, and then you can start putting data into it. And there are a few different ways to get data into these frameworks. One way to do it is you can upload data from a spreadsheet. So when you do that, you would go to assessments, to the assessment module, and then choose the assessment that you're looking for, change to the grade, put in Fontes and Pinnell so it can find the correct one. And it'll list the assessments the frameworks that are out there. They may have data in them, they may not. So you select the one that you're looking for, and that would open up to a page that looks like this. And over here, there's an arrow. It says upload scores with it circled. You would click on that, and you come to a screen that looks like this. And this screen, and for the next few screens, it will give you step-by-step instruction on how to upload that particular file. Once you choose the file, if there are errors in it, it will tell you. If you only want to upload students who have a code, got 14s or above, you can do that. So there's a little bit of logic in there if you want, or you can just say, choose my file and upload the whole file. Again, if you want more detail on that, you can call us and we can give you instructions. On the assessments that are locally made, that not Fontes and Pinnell and DRA, but an assessment that you create for yourself, you can create a framework. So you would, in that case, choose to create a new assessment. And
real quick, I'm sorry, before you go on,
yep.
There's a question about if you can upload your Fontes and Pinnell data anytime, or are there certain restrictions?
Anytime you want, you can do it. You can upload it through a spreadsheet, or you can upload it by hand. So I'll show you the by hand in a minute. So if you create your own framework, and I called this one my locally made assessment, you'd upload the data the same way. You use this upload scores, and then you choose the file, tell it which file it is, the name of the spreadsheet, and follow the steps to upload the data. If your assessment has questions that you want to keep, like question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you want to make sure the answer to each one of those questions is uploaded, you would go in and do that a different way. So you might want to call us for instructions on that if you're going to do that kind of an assessment. This is how you would hand enter, and this happens a lot. You could do it with F&P, you can do it with the DRA. If the teachers give an end of unit assessment or a mid-year assessment, end of year assessment, and you have it out there in P+, the framework set up, the teacher would go into the teacher icon and choose. Usually teachers can only see themselves, but if they can see more, you would choose the grade, show the teachers. You get a list of these third grade teachers. Pick the class. And this particular teacher has 5 classes. So the test was for, I don't remember which one I picked, but there it is, math. So I picked math, and I want to grade this math assessment. I want to grade an assessment for that class. And it was a math class, but I gave it a reading assessment. That's interesting. So I'm going to now choose the assessment. So first I chose the class that took the test, and now I'm choosing the assessment. Continue. And I come to my class, my math class, and I want to grade this assessment, the F&P grade 3. And then here are my students. There are 2 ways to do it once I'm here. I can grade each student individually by checking the student. Oops, you don't have to check it twice. And then just put whatever the number is here. So the student scored a 20 on overall instructional level, and percent of reading accuracy rate, I didn't put that in. Percent of words read accurately, 99, and a 3 for fluency. I could put in notes here about the name of the book that was read or the passage that was read. And then I would save that. So I can do that student by student. An easier way to do it, if you just gave an assessment to the whole class, is switch to mass grade twice. I don't know why. And then you have each student. So here are all the students: instructional level, accuracy, fluency, comprehension. Next student, instructional level, accuracy. So you could just do the whole class at once. And it's much faster to do it that way if you gave an assessment to a whole class. So that's entering data directly into P+ by hand. Sorry. That's all right.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. The final way is to enter it through OLA, which is the online assessment module. Some people have it and some people don't. So you can create an assessment, create the framework, and actually have the students take it online. Then the data goes directly into P+ that way. Nobody's hand entering it. It's just the student answer goes in, or the points go in. This is the intervention data or ILP data. And there are 2 ways to get into this. This right here, this picture, this little window up on the top, is the top of the student detail page. And I feel like I'm talking really fast because it's 5 of. This is the top of the student detail page. And right here is the ILP. So if you have the ILP module, you could click here and come to a section and see the assessment scores. And I think the AimsWeb benchmarks will automatically come into this. And you could see a chart like this. You can keep notes. You can have a questionnaire for parents and fill in all the answers. You can have a questionnaire for students, fill in all the answers. Are we putting other screens in there about that? It's the same with the intervention. The intervention module you would get to from the bottom or the middle of the student detail page. But it's the same. It keeps intervention data, the names of the groups, the names of the teachers, all information about interventions. You can upload student work, which is kind of nice, so you can see some of the work. And that's interventions. I guess we did it in time.
Great.
We have questions?
So there was one question just asking about for somebody who's trying to get into PerformancePLUS and their account's disabled.
Oh, somebody asked. Oh, yeah, we didn't answer that one. A couple people did ask that. Yeah. That every 90 days, I thought it was a year, but I just found out the other day that in 90 days, if you don't use your single sign-on account, your account is disabled. And your local I4C person can fix that, right? Will enable you. Is that correct?
So there's two things. One is you may be disabled within the single sign-on, as Anne's saying, and that's your local I4C rep. If for some reason you're getting into single sign-on, but when you launch Performance Plus, it's saying it's disabled, then send me an email, and the next screen, actually, Anne's going to throw it, has our email addresses on it, or two screens down. And I will look into it. Performance Plus, I know that, I believe they disable people who don't have any teacher records any longer in Performance Plus, but they typically don't do that until, like March for the prior year. So I don't, it could have been that happened to somebody because they haven't been on it for over a year. But anyway, send me an email if that's the trouble that you're having. So there's a couple other questions.
Right there in front of me.
So somebody's just saying that they found out how to add students, so they're excited about that. And then somebody's saying they're good on uploading local assessments, creating reports. It's the roster we need to get up and running. This year, other years are accessible. Is there an SAU level, or should we be doing this at the district level? So again, this I think is just looking to try to find out how to get your rosters up. And if your I4C coordinator should know how to load your class submission and your course submission. So let me show you actually where you can see who your I4C coordinator is. And I may be misunderstanding the question.
Well, I think this person said, she's told me that she found the document. I asked her where, and she was telling me that she found it next to the option to add course students. So it's on that. It's on the page.
Yeah, I showed that before.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry. So I think what Anne's talking about, just to make sure we're on the same page, is if you go to, again, if I type in I4C, like Google I4C, and I go to the main page, and I go to supporting documents, there's a document next to course submissions. If I can find it. Oh, here it is, course submissions. And this document, if we open it, should give you information about how you upload your course submissions and what they mean. The other thing I want to...
I4C coordinator.
Oh, yeah, I want to show folks the I4C coordinator. Thank you. So let me just get these away. Sorry about the stuff popping up on my screen. So, and I know we've hit 4 o'clock, so I'm just going to go for a few more minutes. If anyone has to sign off, we certainly understand why. The I4C contact. So again, if you just Google I4C, not Yahoo, you Google I4C. On the main I4C page are your I4C SAU contacts. So if you click on the SAU contacts, this gives you a list of the folks in each SAU. And all these folks should be very familiar with how they upload course submissions and class submissions. So definitely use them. The last thing I'm going to try to do real quick is I'm going to pause my screen for a quick second and see if I can get you into where you add students in EIS. Because I know that was a question. And while I'm doing that, are there any other questions?
I'm looking. Yes. Somebody's asking about a direct sign into P Plus, or do we need to log in? You do need to log in through the single sign-on, through the DOE single sign-on. That was the last one.
That's the last question. Okay, I'm almost where I need to be.
Any more questions while we're waiting for Mike? If you don't have any more questions, and you really, it is, we said this one from 3 to 4, and it is after 4 now. Thank you for listening, and call or write with any questions. The PowerPoint is attached as one of the handouts, and last slide on the PowerPoint has our phone numbers and our email addresses. So please use them.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen real quick. All I did was took a snag or screenshot, so I'm not revealing any names. I hope not. But if you can see my screen right now, I'm logged into the educator information system. If you click on assignments, so I clicked on assignments up here. Hopefully you see where I am.
See yours. Yeah.
And then under assignments, it shows you the teachers in your school. If I click on courses for a teacher, it then brings up the list of courses for that given teacher. And you'll see there's a students button. If I click on that students link, it'll show you the list of students that are in that course. And on that page, there's a button at the bottom that says add students. So that's the way in EIS that you could add a student. But again, as we showed you, you can now do it directly in Performance Plus, so you may prefer to do it that way as well.
No more.
Aside from that, thank you everybody for taking the time to be part of this. You will receive an automated email from GoToMeeting as an attendee, and there is a link to a survey on that. So we definitely appreciate your feedback. We're going to be doing a lot more of these, so we certainly read those, and we'll make adjustments to future ones. So we definitely thank you for any feedback you can give us. Also, as we've mentioned several times throughout today, we will send a follow-up email to everybody who attended, or even everybody who registered. Some of you may not have attended. Some of those may not have attended, with the follow-ups to some of the things we talked about, like the video to show you how to create a report and some of those other help documents.
So we'll stay on for another couple minutes. If you have some questions, let us know. And otherwise, thank you.
And any more questions?
No more questions.
Okay, so the last thing I'm going to point out for those of you who might still be on, if you go to our website, demonstratorsuccess.com, the main page, you will see that we had a contest for the best dressed classroom, and I want to give a thanks and shout out to Robin Lee. Robin Lee submitted a picture of her classroom, and she does a whole unit now around lemurs. And her whole classroom is set up around lemurs, and it's a theme she uses for the whole semester. It sounds really cool. So hats off to Robin for doing such a nice job with her room and sharing it with all of us. And then the other thing I'll mention is we will, in one of our follow-ups, we'll send information about how you get onto the meeting login, a member login. But the member login up here on our website is where you'll get to all these different resources that we post, including like a recording of this webinar. So we'll have a recording on the webinar up there as well. So with that, I think we're going to sign off, and everybody have a great rest of your week. Thanks.